Welcome back to the Power Sweep podcast. We are excited for another week of college football, another week of big plays at North Coast Sports, and I got to say, we are on a roll. Power Sweep with another big week last week. 8-0 in our key selections in the last 2 weeks.
Might have won the last three.
Yeah, might have had a push on UTSA for some people. Underdog play of the week's on a roll. Robbie's been nailing that. Oklahoma State as an underdog last week against Oklahoma, and late phones did pretty well last week. 4-3. Still we want to do a little better, but we were 3-1 in our totals, which leads us to this week's big play, our totals game of the year, and Jim, that small college game of the year, which was last year,
and we did go 2-1 last week.
Yes. 2-1 last week on our small college plays. FCS for is the real term we should be using. But so a lot of good things going on at North Coast. Jim Seaman, Robbie DePola back with me this week, and we're excited. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well. Got to see my son this past weekend. Came in from Oklahoma, so that was fun and a bit crazy, but miss him and my grandson Maximus. So
we might have to let Maximus pick the winners if we well, I don't want to say that because we've done pretty well. So
yeah, we've done pretty well.
We could put Maximus on the back burner if we don't.
There you go.
If we get cold, we're going to go to Maximus to pick some winners.
Yeah, future. And I mean, last week you went 3-0, so congratulations. You're back to your winning ways.
Thank you. That was a fun week. The underdogs worked out for me. East Carolina and what was the other one I had?
Cockfight.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jacksonville State. Cockfight. How could I forget?
Yeah, I don't know.
Robbie, welcome back to the podcast as well. You got your total win last week. We're excited about that.
Congratulations, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you. They did everything they could in the first half to make sure that game went over the total, but thankfully they stopped scoring there after the first quarter or first half, and the total went under. So yeah, went to a service academy game, which usually is a remedy to fix either take the dog or take the under. So happy to finally break the winless streak in the totals.
Yeah, and we did both last week. You had the podcast total, and then we also used Army in both Power Sweep, and we upgraded to a late phone play. So we went from a 2-star to a 3-star on Army last week. And not only did they cover, 18.5-point dog, they won outright easily, 23-3.
Yeah, it helps when you're +6 turnovers.
Yeah. But, 17 points in the first quarter is the last thing you want to see when the total is like 32 points.
Yeah, I was like, oh, boy. Of course my total finds a way to lose, but it prevailed.
Yeah. So, things are looking up at North Coast. Got some customers that bought on for full exec for the rest of the year. Really excited for that. Customers getting on board. Also NFL. Sean Rhodes did a good job last week. 2-1. Top play. Cincinnati was a winner on Sunday night. So, all things going well for North Coast. So hopefully we keep that up. This week, I mentioned small college game of the year and totals game of the year, so make sure you get on board. Check your Power Sweep on the prices on the back. Don't forget, if you haven't used your 50% off, you get one weekend 50% off any package prices on the back of Power Sweep. You can use that for exec service or Saturday, Sunday star-rated plays. If you haven't already used your 50% off as a Power Sweep subscriber, you get one weekend 50% off. So you can use it this week. We're going to have our college game of the year and NFL game of the year as well coming up in the next few weeks. So you can use it on one of those weekends as well. The only weekend you can't use that is Thanksgiving weekend. All right, let's get into the picks this week. I'm going to lead it off since I went 3-0 last week. And I'm sticking with my underdogs. I wanted to make sure I had at least one underdog on the card this week. Going to Wake Forest. And, in the past, Wake Forest has been a team that you can really rely on as an underdog. This year's been a little spotty. They've actually lost 5 of their last 6 games, but they're still a team that can make a bowl. They're 4-5. They have 2 winnable games down the stretch this week against NC State, and then in 2 weeks at Syracuse, the season finale. Probably going to lose at Notre Dame next week. But, with Notre Dame on the schedule, you have to win this game, your home finale, to get to a bowl. And you're playing NC State, who is, off of two big upset wins. They beat Clemson 2 weeks ago, 24-17. Then they followed that up and beat Miami 20-6. A game that I really wasn't sure if they could pull that off 2 weeks in a row, but they did. But the surprising thing is how they did it. They were outgained 364-202 against Clemson, outgained 292-231 against Miami. So they've put up 433 yards in the last 2 weeks, yet won both games. This offense is averaging 318 yards a game, only 285 yards a game. Even more alarming, the offense was actually a little improved under MJ Morris in the last 4 games. Before that, they had Brennan Armstrong, who had a 5-6 ratio. Well, MJ Morris was expected to redshirt before the season started, but Armstrong performed poorly, so they benched Armstrong and decided to go with Morris. But now Morris decided he wants to continue to hold his red shirt, so he's not going to play these last 3 games. He's sitting out. So your starting quarterback just arbitrarily decided, you know what, I want a red shirt. I'm not playing these last 3 games. So they're going to go back to Brennan Armstrong, it looks like. He was not very good when he started. A lot of his numbers were inflated by a 45-7 win over VMI. I don't think that this is an NC State offense that's going to score very much, to say the least. They do have a solid defense, but Wake Forest is, that slow mesh can be a little tough to defend. They did get their starting quarterback, Mitch Griffiths, back last week against Duke. And, they lost 24-21, but by all rights, they should have won that game. They had some turnover issues. They outgained Duke 400-267. I think they missed a field goal in there. Turned the ball over on downs a couple times deep in Duke territory. So this is a Wake Forest team that needs a win. I think they have the better offense. I really like their running back, Damon Claiborne. It pains me to say that I was impressed with him against Pitt a few weeks ago, a game where we had Pitt and were really frustrated. He broke some big runs. Man, he runs strong. He has 574 yards this year. So I think Wake Forest +2.5, would love to get it at +3. I might buy it up a half point, but for podcast purposes, I'll get it at 2.5. And I think the Demon Deacons win this game. To me, it's a big situation edge. It is our situation play of the week in Power Sweep. Wake Forest at home, needing a win against an NC State team off 2 big upset wins. So I'll take Wake Forest +2.5. All right, Jim, you let me see here. 13-7 overall on the year, 9-11 on your sides. I'm just a couple games ahead of you. I'm actually worse on my sides. But where are you going from this first play?
Yeah, I actually won my total last week and came up a couple of steps short of a Florida State running back breaking the plane of at least going 2-1. So
yeah, we were 3-0 on our totals in the podcast last week. So good sign going into totals game of the year.
Correct. I'm going to go with UTSA -14.5 over Rice. I think this is kind of an interesting game. UTSA in their Conference USA meetings has won all 7. They've covered the last 4 straight.
Don't forget AAC now, no longer CUSA, AAC.
Yeah, I'm sorry. AAC. Anyway,
I love to correct Jim.
It's okay. You're fine. Yes, you do. Anyway, they've won 7 straight, covered 4 straight, including a 45-0 win in 21 and a 41-7 win in 22. UTSA right now, they're in a 3-way tie for lead in the American Conference. They're 5-0 along with Tulane and SMU. So they're not going to take their foot off the gas no matter who they're playing. They only have USF on deck. So it's not any place where they're going to look ahead. Their last 5 games, they're 5-0 straight up. All is the favorite. 4-1 against the spread. And their only non-cover was a 41-27 win over East Carolina as an 18.5-point favorite. Last week, they led into the fourth quarter 30-13 versus North Texas. They did allow North Texas to score 2 touchdowns with the 2-point conversions, and only won 37-29. So they're not going to take their foot off the gas here because that game got a little bit closer than it should have. They still did cover, but because UTSA was able to run out the last 5 minutes, 50 seconds, taking a knee in North Texas territory. Rice has had hold on here. Rice has covered the last couple, but right now they have 4 wins. They need 2 wins to make a bowl, and they have 3-6 Charlotte and 4-5 Florida Atlantic on deck. So I don't think they're going to sell out here if they get behind because they have 2 winnable games ahead of them. The other big thing here is Rice's quarterback was injured last week. He's in concussion protocol, and from what they said, he does not remember the drive that he was injured on. So I really don't think that he's going to be playing in this game. So I think this line could go up some, and so I'd say get UTSA minus the 14.5 early.
And also don't forget, Jim, that in that non-cover that UTSA had against
East Carolina.
They were up 21. East Carolina scored with 15 seconds left to backdoor them. So they are very close to 5 straight covers in AAC play, and they've been pretty dominant. Trailers teams have done that in the last few years. They play non-conference. They kind of are just trying to sort themselves out, figure everything out. They take the conference games way more seriously, and they've dominated in conference play. Hunt plus 17 points a game, plus 67 yards per game conference play. So I like what Jeff Traylor's done there. All right, Robbie, we're going to go to you. You've been the Big 12 expert here, and I think you have a Big 12 play for us to lead off.
Yeah, I'm going to top Jim's big line of 14.5, and I'm going to take Kansas State as a 20.5 point favorite right now at home against Baylor. These are teams kind of headed in opposite directions as the season heads into its final few weeks. And Kansas is just a dominant, Kansas State is just a dominant team at home this season. In their 3 Big 12 games at home so far, they're plus 201 yards per game, plus 31 points per game. They've beaten UCF 44-31. Then their last 2 home games, they beat TCU 41-3 and Houston 41-0. They're just destroying teams at home. They've covered 6 straight games as a Big 12 home favorite. And obviously they're a big home favorite here. Meanwhile, Baylor comes in at just 3-6. Slim hopes to get to a bowl for them, as they have Kansas State, TCU, and West Virginia to close out their schedule. Don't see them running the table there. There's already talk of players entering the transfer portal for them as well. There's writers calling for Aranda to try their 2nd and 3rd string quarterbacks to maybe change things up because they just haven't had success. Baylor's only 2 Big 12 wins are at UCF, where if you remember, they were down by 28 points in the second half and came back, and they beat Cincinnati on the road by 3 despite getting outgained. Baylor's actually gotten outgained in all but one of their Big 12 games this season. They're minus 48 yards per game in conference play, not doing very well there. Kansas State their offense is led by their potent rush attack. They have 2 quarterbacks that can run. Their top 2 running backs are very, very effective on the ground. In Big 12 play, they're putting up 221, 5.3, and Baylor's rush D is allowing almost 200 yards per game on the ground in Big 12 play. Meanwhile, Baylor's rushing attack is putting up less than 100 yards per game in conference play, and they've given up 24 sacks in Big 12 play. And they'll also face a number 6 pass defense here as well. So I don't see Baylor having a good day moving the ball. I don't think their defense is going to do a lot to stop Kansas State. Kansas State feels like they kind of let one go last week at Texas. They were down 27-7. All of a sudden, they mount a miraculous comeback. Actually, should have taken the lead if it wasn't for a botched PAT attempt. So I just think this is a complete mismatch. And the way Kansas State's been beaten up on Big 12 teams at home, I expect that here. I mean, I think Kansas State wins this by at least 4 touchdowns, maybe more. They might pull another 41-3, 41-0 type game here. That wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, they've been on a roll, and you mentioned it. They really have played good defense. They have a really good offensive line. You got to like what they're doing. And Baylor just seems like they're going in the wrong direction. So you've been nailing the Big 12 plays, Robbie. So keep it up, and hopefully we'll bring in some winners this week.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully that trend keeps on rolling.
Yeah, and I'm going to go to the SEC now for round 2 to start things off. I'm going to go to Texas A&M, and I have a love-hate relationship with Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. I don't always like the way I don't always like the guy, but he does bring in a ton of talent, and I don't always like the way he coaches. But they are a pretty good home favorite usually, and in spite of the fact that they failed to cover against South Carolina a few weeks ago, they did have a 21-7 lead at halftime. They looked like they were dominant, but this is also a play for me against Mississippi State, who is just looking listless. Last week, they lost 24-3 at home against Kentucky. That was Kentucky's first road win against an SEC West opponent in 15 years. First road win against an SEC West opponent for Mark Stoops. So to lose that game at home that way was pretty embarrassing. They had 218 yards in that game. They're really struggling to pass the ball without Will Rogers. They actually, for a little while last week, went to true freshman Chris Parson, who finished 6 of 14 for 67 yards. It's not going to fly when you're playing Texas A&M's stout defensive line, and I really think that Mississippi State probably at this point just can't wait to get the season over with. They technically can get to a bowl game. They would have to pull an upset somewhere, whether it be A&M or Ole Miss. They probably will win next week against Southern Miss, which should be their 4th win. But, the only win they have in SEC play this year was a 7-3 slugfest against Arkansas, which I think was, there's games where you're like, all right, two defenses played really well. I didn't think that game was 2 defenses playing really well. I thought that game was 2 offenses playing like crap to the point where somebody had to win the game, and it resulted in Arkansas's offensive coordinator getting fired afterwards. So I think that Arkansas was a little beat up after having played a lot of good teams in a row. I don't think much of this Mississippi State team. Their offense is averaging 336 yards per game. Last 5, they only averaged 302. A&M averaging 401 a game. They're only allowing 297 a game. They're holding opponents 112 yards per game below their average. Max Johnson's been okay, 9-5 ratio. Again, this is just a play against Mississippi State for me. Trying to check their ATS record, 2-7 against the spread on the year. They have failed to cover all but one game against FBS foes. The Arkansas game is the only game they've covered against an FBS foe this year. That includes a 23-point loss at home against Alabama. A&M led Alabama at halftime. And it, quite a bit of the way into the third quarter, looked like they could have pulled that one out. Didn't cover against Auburn. A&M beat Auburn by 17. They actually lost by 14 against against Auburn. 7-point loss against South Carolina. A&M beat South Carolina by 13. Just not a very good team. Also, LSU, Mississippi State, that lost that game by 27. A&M hasn't played LSU yet. But I will take Texas A&M minus 18.5 at home in Kyle Field. Jim, you're sticking in the SEC. What do you got?
Yeah, I usually don't travel into your territory, but with the MAC playing weekday games, I have to go somewhere. So I'm going to follow you into the SEC. I'm actually going to go with Alabama minus 10.5 over Kentucky. Alabama has won 7 straight in this series, covering 3 of the last 4. and their only non-cover was a 34-6 win in 2016 as a 38.5-point favorite. So it's not always easy to cover as a 38.5-point favorite. They last met in 2020. Bama had a 509 to 179 yard edge and won 63-3 as a 32-point favorite. So I guess you can win as a 32-point favorite. Also, the visitor here is 6-1 against the spread. Alabama held explosive offenses of LSU and Tennessee to just 7 second-half points the last 2 weeks. So they make those adjustments and pull away in the second half. And a lot of this is, I'll say, from your wonderful write-up in the Power Sweep. Alabama is plus 57 yards per game despite facing the number 2 toughest schedule. And kind of as you pointed out, and in the write-up, Kentucky under Stoops has just 2 wins over an SEC team with a winning record, which is kind of amazing. Bama beats both Tennessee and LSU the last 2 weeks by 14, and they're only favored by 10.5 here. Kentucky, in their 2 games as a dog, are 0-2 straight up in ATS. They lost 51-13 to Georgia as a 14.5-point away dog, 33-27 to Tennessee as a 3.5-point dog, and they also lost to Missouri 38-21 as a 2.5-point favorite. They're just 1-3 straight up and 8 against the spread their last 4. As you said, they kind of got that win last week, and I guess they'll be happy with that. Alabama comes in, they're number 8 in the college football playoff rankings. So they want to still make some noise. They don't want any close wins to where they can possibly drop down. So I see Bama rolling. So roll Tide.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I think Bama is going to roll here. Kentucky got thoroughly dominated by Georgia, and I think Bama could do something similar. Might not be quite as dominant on the road, but I don't think that Kentucky has the firepower to stick with him. And Jalen Milroe, man, he looked like he wanted to put his name in the Heisman ballot. I don't think he's going to get there. Slow start to the year, but he had a big game last week against LSU. All right, Robbie, where are you going for your second play?
I'm going to go to a conference that actually hasn't been too kind to us this year. So I'm going to reluctantly or cautiously step back into the Sun Belt here.
Boldly. You're going to boldly step into the Sun Belt.
Cautiously for right now. We'll see.
Boldly going where no man has gone before.
But I'm going to go to a game with a line to me that is kind of an odd one. Coastal Carolina is at home. They're facing Texas State, and the line is Coastal Carolina plus 1.5. So they're actually a very, very slight underdog at home, which to me is I get it on the surface. Coastal is without Grayson McCall. He suffered a concussion a couple weeks ago. Has been it sounded like it was pretty severe. So he's still working his way back from that. But Coastal Carolina started 2 different quarterbacks the last 2 weeks, and they beat Marshall 34-6 2 weeks ago, and last week beat Old Dominion 28-24. So I know last week's game was a little closer, but still haven't skipped a beat. 1-2 straight, put up 427 and 458. And Texas State's probably off arguably one of their biggest wins since they jumped to the FBS. They beat Georgia Southern last week 45-24, and why that win is so significant is because that clinched Texas State's first trip to a bowl game since moving up to the FBS level. And the team and the players celebrated heavily after the game. There was a big celebration on the field. Then there is actually a river by the stadium, and several of the players chose to jump into the river in a big celebration. There was a lot of fans. What G.J. Kinney's been able to do there in his first year there has been quite remarkable, given the fact that he turned over so much of that roster with over 60 new players. But I got to feel there's going to be a little bit of a hangover here after such a big win for them. And Coastal Carolina is 20-3 straight up at home since 2020. They play very well at home. They're playing with a lot of confidence as well. The last 4 weeks, they've put up 473 yards per game. Texas State's defense has improved as the season has gone on, but still known for giving up yards. They're giving up over 400 yards per game in Sun Belt play. Meanwhile, Texas State's offense is what they're more known for under Kinney. They're putting up 465 in Sun Belt play. However, they're facing a Coastal Carolina team that only gives up 130 yards per game rushing, and they have the number 38 pass defense. So I just don't know how Texas State's going to be able to move the ball. They will get some points, some yards. Their offense is very good, but Coastal Carolina, depending on if it's Jarrett Guest or Ethan Vasco, they've both proven capable, and the offense is still putting up good numbers despite not having their best player. So at home, I would expect Coastal Carolina to get the win. All they need to do is win as a slight underdog. I think they can win this game. I think it'll be closer. I think it'll be about a 7 to 10 point game, but I like Coastal Carolina here at home against Texas State.
All right, now let's get rolling into our totals. And like I said, 3-0 in our totals last week. I think Robbie's about to get on a roll on his. And just once again, for clarification, Robbie's not bad on totals. Just been bad luck on a podcast because he picks our comp total that we put out every Tuesday morning. And how many weeks in a row is that one, Robbie?
7, I think.
Yeah. So just picking the wrong one for the podcast. But I think hopefully we get on a roll. And we're going to have some, these are going to be in a mix for our totals game of the year. Not necessarily going to end. I don't know that one of these will end up being a totals game of the year, but could be in the mix for it. I'm going to start out with Miami versus Florida State under 50. And I really wonder what's going on with Miami's offense. Hurricanes last couple weeks, the offense has been listless. 276 yards against Virginia, 292 against NC State. And that 276 is actually a little inflated against Virginia because they had 25 overtime yards. Tyler Van Dyke, since he came back from injury, remember, he got hurt against North Carolina. He sat out the next week against Clemson. He came back, and he has 0 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in the last 2 games. I don't know what's going on with him. 10-5 ratio. I'm sorry, no, opposite. 5-10 ratio in his last 4 starts. So it's been pretty ugly for Van Dyke, which is, strange because he's been a good quarterback. But last year he didn't play as well either. And, really you got to go back to 21 when he had a 25-6 ratio, played really well. That was back when Manny Diaz was still the head coach at Miami. Miami's running game has been okay, but in the last 4 weeks, they only average 134 rushing yards a game. They do have a very good offensive line. I like their O-line. They protect the quarterback well. Defensively, though, they really get after it, holding opponents 68 yards per game below their average. They have 29 sacks in the season. That includes 19 in conference play. They had 6 a couple weeks ago against Virginia. 20-6 loss last week at NC State, so they only had 6 points. The week before, the game ended up going over the total, but would have went under if you just count regulation, because it was 23-23 at the end of regulation and ended up going over because of the overtime. There was 9 points in overtime. Couple games earlier in the year, 23-20 against Georgia Tech. That was a weird turnover game. I believe they also went under against Clemson. That was 28-20. Miami won that game. Just barely went under 48.5. You look at the series, and last year Miami really got shut down by Florida State. They put up 3 points in this game and just 188 yards. But 4, 5, 6 of the last 8 meetings, the winner has not topped 30 points. So I think that you're going to see a similar game. 3 of the last 4 meetings have gone under. 5 of the last 7 have gone under. It's been pretty much an under series. It's also been an underdog series. The underdog is 18-7 against the spread, and the visitor has covered 7 of the last 8, 7 of the last 9. So it definitely, I think, we lean Miami in power sweep. I'm not confident enough to make that a play, but I do think this could be a defensive battle. Florida State's been a little banged up. They were without their top 2 receivers last week. Keon Coleman is a future star, possibly in the NFL. I do think he's going to return this week. He's practicing. Jordan Travis, very good quarterback. But I've seen some concerns. Last week they only put up 24 points against Pitt, 38 points against Duke, but they got off to a slow start in that game. You know, the offense has played well all year, but they're probably playing the best defense they've faced since Clemson, which they only had 24 offensive points in that game. And defensively, they're holding opponents 56 yards per game below their average. Last 4 games for Florida State, they're holding opponents to 269 yards and just 12 points per game. So Florida State's defense performing well, and I think they're catching a Miami offense that's not at the standard that they expected it to be. So I'll take Miami versus Florida State under 50 for my total. All right, Jim, what do you have for your total?
I'm going to go someplace I normally don't go, and that's with an under. And I'm going to go under 56.5 in the New Mexico State Western Kentucky game. The Aggies have actually gone 7-1 to the under the last 4 weeks, or the last 8 weeks. There you go, including 4 straight unders. Their one over in that time, though, was over 48.5, and the score was a combined 51 points. So they have actually had 8 straight games go under this total of 56.5. And that includes last week where they were in a big shootout with Middle Tennessee for that 13-7 win. And this is not your normal high-scoring Western Kentucky team that we've come to expect. 4 of their last 6 have gone under. And last week, it was a 21-13 win over UTEP. New Mexico State for the season versus FBS foes is averaging just 23.8 yards or points per game. Their highest output in that time is 34 versus FBS teams. They're allowing just 17.3 points per game. So they do have a good defense. And if you look at that, that's about 41 points overall. Western Kentucky against FBS foes is putting up just 26 points per game while allowing 28.4 points per game, which is 54.4 points per game combined versus FBS foes. And I just think that in a lot of ways, I kind of miss New Mexico State because that one, if you will, over that kind of went there. And last week I kind of looked at them, noticed them, and decided to pay some attention. And, you know, that was a nice under last week. And I think this game goes under that 56.5 total.
Yeah, absolutely. Western Kentucky, you know, the offense has not clicked the way they expected it to with Austin Reed and company, but defense played a little better in New Mexico State. Like you mentioned, they've been an under machine lately. All right, Robbie, let's finish it up with your second straight winning total.
Yeah. Just for a second, just to back up what Chris was saying a moment ago, looking at our records overall for the totals that we have to choose from on Saturdays, Chris is 33-23-2, and myself, I'm 32-24-2. So it just happens to be I'm picking the wrong total for this, but we have done very well on our totals. So we're not trying to lie or misinform you. We do well on our totals, and we have the record to back it up. Just wanted to put that out there.
Well, and you see our late phone total record, you know, that's really indicative of.
Yeah, I think we're like 22-16, I believe.
Yeah, 3-1 last week. The 3 easy winners last week.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, my total this week is going to be Old Dominion and Liberty to go over 59.5. Old Dominion the last couple weeks, they've played a couple of close games against James Madison and Coastal Carolina. But despite those being close, they've given up 463 to James Madison and 458 to Coastal. And here they're facing a Liberty offense that's putting up 514 yards per game and 43 points per game in their last 4. And Liberty's last 3 games have reached 86, 71, and 77 points. So well over this total of 59.5. Old Dominion, they gave up 278 rushing yards, 6.2 yards a carry last week to Coastal. and 170 of those came against Coastal's quarterback. And here they got to face Caden Salter, he's the number 2 rusher on the team at Liberty with 664 and 6.4. So they could pop off he could pop off some big runs against an Old Dominion team that looks like they sometimes struggle to stop the quarterback run. However, Old Dominion is facing a Liberty pass defense that's given up 334 pass yards per game over the last 3 games. They do lead the FBS with 16 interceptions, but however, they do like to gamble a lot on the defensive side of the ball. And Old Dominion more than likely will be able to hit a few big pass plays on this Liberty pass defense here. And since Kadarius Callaway for Old Dominion, he's a highly rated JUCO running back. Since he stepped into the lineup a few weeks ago, he's been Old Dominion's lead back. He's ran for 523 yards and 9 yards a carry. And Liberty's run defense hasn't gotten completely gashed yet, but their schedule has been very weak. This very well could be the best running back they've faced up to this point. So I would expect him to have a few big runs as well. Just with this total sitting under 60 right now, the way Liberty's played on offense, I would expect them to at least put up 40, 42 points here. And I think Old Dominion's good for at least 24 to 28 points here. I think Liberty wins the game probably by 10 points, 14 points. But I do think these are 2 teams that are definitely going to put up points. So give me the over 59.5 in this game.
Yeah, Tennessee transfer Caden Salter really turning it on at Liberty.
Yeah, he found a home.
Yeah. You got to wonder if he's going to stay in that home because he has SEC talent. Is he going to stay at Liberty or does he end up entering the portal after the season?
Yeah, he might be better off staying there.
Yeah, probably. But
the grass isn't always greener, as a lot of these players come to find out.
No, real quick, Robbie, I just want your take because I saw Ric Flair is going to Michigan and helping Michigan learn how to play the villain role. What do you think of that?
I mean, I know Ric Flair's been a Michigan fan. I know he's supported that program for a while. I mean, if there's anyone who knows how to be a villain, it's Ric Flair. I mean, he did it his whole professional wrestling career. I mean, I don't know why you need Ric Flair to do that. You can just play the villain by, hey, the whole world hates us right now. They want to see us fail. I mean, I don't know why you need to bring him in, but hey, if it helps, it helps. I'm sure these 18 to 23-year-old kids will love having a celebrity Ric Flair giving them a pep talk. So, hey, if it helps Michigan, all the power to them.
Yeah, and speaking of villains, why haven't we heard from you the last couple of weeks, Sassy Jim?
That's a good one.
All right. This week's podcast code will get you $10 off any late phone package on the prices on the back of Power Sweep, or $10 off Power Sweep if you haven't signed up yet this year. And the podcast code in honor of the red hot Oklahoma State Cowboys will be Cowboys. Podcast code is Cowboys, not the Dallas Cowboys, Oklahoma State Cowboys, but the code is just Cowboys. Cowboys, $10 off Power Sweep or any late phone package. Prices on the back of Power Sweep. So definitely check that out. Robbie, any parting words?
Yeah, just hop on board these last few weeks. Like Chris said at the beginning, we've had a good run the last couple weeks here. Feel like we're going to be getting on a nice little run here. We got some big plays coming up, so hop on board. We're going to give you some winners. Thanks for listening again.
And Jim, anything? Parting words?
Thanks for listening and take care of yourselves out there.
All right. Always appreciate our listeners, and we look forward to having you listen next week. Bye.